Hello, Misfits, and welcome. In today's video, we're talking all about red flags, specifically red flags you might have to look out for in potential players at your table. I have read so many stories and posts about different advice that people are seeking when they are getting into TTRPGs. And a lot of people seem to struggle with one thing, which is finding a table. You know, some of us are lucky and are able to play with some of our closest friends that we know and we trust, and we know we're gonna have a good time with them. But some of us, the only way we can get into these games is by playing with people that we don't know very well. And how do we figure out who's going to be a good person to play with? Who's going to be a good player that's going to try and work with everybody at the table? And then who's going to be problematic? Who's going to ruin the experience for everybody there? It can be really tough to figure out what to look out for. But as I have heard all these horror stories and read about them, I have kind of formed a list of about 5 different red flags that you might want to look out for when you're trying to put your table together. I should preface this by saying that these are just my opinions and my observations, and some of these might be more problematic than others. None of them are in any particular order, and some of these can be solved by just plain old communication, where you sit down and talk to the person and just sort of figure out what's going on and what needs to happen to move forward. So just keep that in mind. This isn't like if somebody exhibits this, you have to immediately kick them. No. Like, be adults, talk to each other before you do anything rash or dire, alright? Alright, so let's just get into it. Today's episode is sponsored by me? Maybe. So something I constantly forget to promote and talk about is the fact that all of Campaign 2 and all of the holiday episodes are up on Spotify. You can actually find them on most podcasting platforms, Apple, Google, but they started on Spotify, and yeah, that's kind of how this channel existed or got started in the first place. I wanted a place where I could put the recordings of our games up, and Spotify started to be that for us. Campaign 1 is exclusive to YouTube, mostly because there is music in those games that is not royalty free, and I could put them up on here and not monetize them, and everybody would have access to them. But all of Campaign 2 is up on Spotify, and pretty much all of our holiday stuff is up there as well. And in some cases, the audio quality is actually a little bit better over there. But a really cool thing about Spotify is you can actually choose to support the channel. I will provide a link below, but you can choose to just donate a monthly amount to Misfit Adventurers if you feel so called to do so, just sort of to help us fund future episodes and things like that. I'm certainly not like strongly pushing it or telling you that you have to do that. There aren't any amazing perks tied to that donation, but if that's something you feel compelled to do, feel free to do it. At the very least, listen to those episodes, give us some ratings, give us a thumbs up, whatever, you know the drill. But yeah, I always forget to talk about that, and that just shows that I'm really bad at being a saleswoman, so I'm talking about it today. Anyway, let's get back to the episode. Red flag number 1 is wanting to be a higher level than the rest of the party. This is something that I've actually seen firsthand. It's never really been a game that I've personally played in. One of the instances, it completely fizzled out before the game even actually happened, but there have been times in which people have argued to be a higher level than everybody else, sometimes even several levels higher than everybody else in the party. And this, for me, is a huge red flag, because this could be a sign of them wanting to be a main character, or them having this main character syndrome, where they want to appear as this OP person that comes in, wins all the battles, saves the day, and kind of outshines everybody else at the table. There is, there's an argument to be made about not everybody in the party being the same level. I certainly have very strong opinions about, not being fair with XP that is awarded to the players, But every table is different. Everybody's going to find their own groove and find what works for them. But if you want to come into the game and be like 3 levels higher than everybody else, I think that's a big red flag. The point of these games is collaborative storytelling. It's working together to go on these adventures, to fight evil, to tell these stories. And if somebody is way higher than everybody else, then that storytelling experience is not going to be even. It is not going to be balanced. It's going to be nearly impossible for the level 1 wizard or bard or rogue to compete with the level 4 fighter or paladin. That's going to be so different. I mean, we're talking classes that have their subclasses and their extra attacks versus classes that don't have that yet. You have to be very careful about balancing these things out, and if you've got somebody that's just really fighting you on this, really arguing their case and is not seeing reason on why you want everybody to be the same level, then you've got a problem. Number 2 is using the "it's what my character would do" as an excuse in-game to be difficult. Now, I will say, there is something to be said about playing in character. There's something to be said about doing things or approaching scenarios in a certain way because it is what the character would actually do. But you can't just fall back on that as an excuse to be a jerk. And that's what a lot of people do. And that's what you normally hear about. They use the "it's what my character would do" as an excuse to just be difficult, to not work with the other people at the table, to avoid, story hooks and plot details, to not interact with very important NPCs, or not do just basic things that are expected in these types of games. And all of this is just under the guise of an excuse of "it's what my character would do." That is just something to watch out for. I do think it's something that you can talk through and maybe kind of get them to work around and get over. But it's something to watch out for, because again, it could end up being sort of like a main character syndrome sort of situation where, they want to tell their own story. They don't want to tell a story with everybody else. They clearly have their own idea of how everything's going to play out and pan out, and so they're using this as an excuse to tell their own tale instead of being open to, other things that might come up in game, or open to telling this story with all the other party members. It could be a sign of that main character syndrome. And it could also just be a sign of them just not really being like a team player. It could be a sign of them just not being able to see reason, not being respectful of you as the dungeon master or respectful of the other people at the table. There's a lot of ways in which this could become a bigger problem down the road. So really watch out for the "it's what my character would do," especially if it involves things that are outside of gameplay. If it's what my character would do is your excuse for not showing up for a game, that's kind of dumb. That's kind of stupid. It doesn't make sense. Or well, my character wouldn't do this, so, I'm not going to do that. I just think that's just so weak as an argument, and yeah, it's just not enough to justify being problematic or being a jerk, There's acting, and then there's just being rude, and they are different things, and there has to be some line where it's all right, we act up to a point, and then we remember that we're real human beings interacting with other people, and we need to be respectful, and then we don't cross that line and try to push past that and become a jerk, Alright, number 3, designing characters that won't work with others. So these would be designing characters that are extremely isolated and sort of the loner brooding type. Or maybe even designing characters that are chaotic or literally evil characters when the rest of the party is good. You know, if everybody's doing that, if that's sort of the theme of the campaign, then that's fine. But if you're creating like an extremely isolated loner character in a game in which you're supposed to work with other people as a group to form a party and accomplish a goal, it's just not going to work out. I've literally read stories where somebody comes to a table and they have their perfect emo, brooding, sad boy character, and it's like session 1 or 2, and the DM is trying to give them that plot hook so that they start the main quest and start the story, and they're like, yeah, I just don't think my character would go hang out with these people. I just don't think it's what my character would do. I just don't think, I could see my character becoming friends with these people that they don't know. And that's problematic. It's like, you have to join these people to start the game and work together. Like, the point of the game is a party that fights evil together, or, accomplishes a goal or goes off on a quest together. So if you're creating a character that is not designed to ever work with anybody else, you're not creating a character for D&D or for most typical TTRPGs. You are not setting yourself up to have a good time with that character. And if you create an evil character when everybody else is good, there are scenarios in which if it's handled correctly and everybody communicates ahead of time and things are talked about and approved in session 0, then it's fine. But if you show up with an evil character to a good aligned table and nobody was aware that that was going to happen, and you use that as an excuse to kill the other PCs, to kill NPCs you don't like, it's just a problem. It's just a mess, and now you're kind of ruining the fun of everybody else at the table. So those are definitely some things to look out for. Designing those characters that don't work with others. It really goes hand in hand with it's what my character would do. Like, I feel like those two end up happening together at the same time. You design these characters that don't work with others, and then when they start acting like jerks in the story, you use it's what my character would do as like the reasoning and justification behind it. So a lot of this can sort of be talked through in a session 0, where you set the ground rules, you set the expectations, you talk to everybody about the characters they're making, the characters they want to make, and you sort of talk them through what kind of needs to happen. There's going to be a hook. We have to work together, so just keep that in mind, You don't have to necessarily balance out the classes if you don't want to, but there needs to be some sort of discussion about, how these characters might work or not work together. Number 4, constantly correcting or questioning the DM. This is a big one. Sometimes this can be your rules lawyer. That's like, constantly going, well, actually, you couldn't use that spell that way because, according to the rules, blah, 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 blah. And it could also just be like, the DM gives a ruling that's not covered in the rules, or the DM, poses a scenario or a question, and suddenly that player is just combative and just doesn't like the way things are going and is going to argue with the DM about their rulings and about, what's happening. This is a tough one because, again, I think some of this can be talked about in session 0, where, you just sort of establish that the DM is in charge, the DM has the final say. But sometimes this can be worked through in just like a one-on-one conversation of like, hey, I noticed these things were happening and I wondered if we could talk about that. I noticed you didn't really like it when I ruled this scenario this way, and I was wondering, what about that upset you? If maybe we can work something out or figure out how to avoid things like this in the future. A lot of this can be handled with just a conversation. But I will say, I do have a small soft spot for like the rules lawyer kind of version of this sort of player. There are rules lawyers that are bad. That is true. But there are rules lawyers that I believe their powers can be harnessed for good. Sometimes players constantly, insert their knowledge of the game because they are simply just passionate about the game. And you can talk to them and sort of maybe give them some sort of a job or task. Like, hey, I'm not very good at remembering, spell details or things like that. If I ever forget something mid-session, could you look it up real quick and just sort of double check me on that? You could use that, and then they're a tool in your belt that you can use to make your game run smoother. As long as they understand that you have the final say, I think a rules lawyer is fine. But if they are unwilling to, recognize that the DM is the one in charge, the DM ultimately has the final say, then that's where things become a problem. And I hear a lot of, stories and situations in which we have these players that really question the rulings of the DM, whether it's justified or not. They just sort of refuse to acknowledge that the DM is in charge, and it becomes really problematic. And then, we're not playing a game anymore. We're just arguing at each other, and there happens to be a table in between us. So that's definitely something to look out for. I think some of this can be vetted in a session 0, but the second you start getting some of these, constantly questioning sort of things happen, sit down and have a discussion with them. If they're questioning the way you are running the game and handling the rules, make sure they understand that it's in the core rule books of, I think, all of these games, that the DM has the final say, or the GM has the final say. They get to kind of bend the rules where they see fit. Make sure they get that. But also make sure you establish that understanding in session 0 as well. Be transparent and don't let them, don't be a pushover, I guess. Don't let them tell you what to do. Make sure that you are the one in charge. You set the ground rules, and you just sort of talk things out as these problems arise. Number 5, talking over other players and sort of stealing the spotlight. A lot of these problems have been sort of this main character syndrome kind of thing. And this is another one of those potential main character syndrome things, talking over players. It's a big deal. It's really, really tough. I think this can be, well, I don't know. I think sometimes in-person games struggle with this more, talking over each other, but I think people that are new to playing online will encounter this as well. Online games, normally it's nice if you're not talking, you just mute, and it's a little easier to sort of limit crosstalk. But in person, that can be difficult. You don't have a mute button for all the people at your table. So this really is going to rely on the DM to kind of really take the reins and take control over who's getting their little vignette, their little moment as their character where they get to do their own thing. Make sure that, you aren't spending more time on one person than somebody else. You're trying to divide the attention between everybody at your table. And if you've got people that just start talking over whoever you're, paying attention to, whoever you're addressing, they just decide, no, it's my spotlight time again. You need to, politely just say, all right, we'll get to you in a second. We're in the middle of this moment with this character, and your character's not in that room at this moment. Just make sure that you are respectful about it, and just all right, we'll get to you in a second. Hang on. We were in the middle of this with this player. I think if you are polite about it, this can kind of be, contained, and it won't become such a big problem. But if they really don't understand that, if they just keep talking over people, and it's getting to the point where everybody else is just not enjoying the game anymore, that's when you might need to have a private discussion with them and, just sort of check in and see if this is the table for them, if they're aware of what they're doing, because they might not be aware. They might not realize that they're talking over the other players. And if you're like, hey, I just noticed that you seem really eager about the game and the story, and sometimes I think you accidentally sort of talk over or butt in when I'm in the middle of a moment with one of these other players. Is there a way that we can, balance out the time between the different players a little better, or is there a way in which I can give you a signal or a cue when I'm like, all right, it's your time to take all the spotlight. If you just sort of have that conversation with this player, I think you can work out things and sort of avoid them becoming overly problematic. All right, so this was 5 red flags to look out for in potential players at your table. If you ever want me to make one for DMs, please let me know in the comments below. But yeah, I hope this video was useful for you. It can be very difficult to sort of balance all the different dynamics that people bring to the table. Everybody plays these games in a different way. Everybody's going to go about these things in a different way. And so it can be really tricky to kind of figure out how to manage all these different types of people. It certainly takes a lot of practice. I know I get a leg up because I'm a teacher, so I'm pretty used to dealing with different personalities and trying to figure out how to, divide my attention between them all, but it's not easy, and it can be hard to address some of these behaviors in peaceful ways. Some of these people might, come out the gate swinging, and at that point, it's just, maybe this table's not the one for you. I'm really sorry it didn't work out, Sometimes it has to happen, those conversations. But if this video was helpful for you, if you enjoyed the stuff that we talked about here today, please give me a like or subscribe to this channel. But more importantly, leave me a comment down below. Tell me about red flags that you notice in possible players at your table. Tell me about green flags that you're very grateful for at your table. Tell me about horror stories you've heard of, or ways in which you dealt with some of these types of players in sort of a, tactful way that worked out for you. I'd love to hear all of those stories. They always give me so many ideas for possible videos. But with all of that said and done, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week, and I will see you again next time. Sorry for my brief absence. School is back in session, and I am back in the classroom, teaching away, and boy, am I tired. I am so tired. But it's fine. It's, I was really, really dreading it leading up to the first day back. But now that I am back, it's not as awful as I thought it would be. It's not as draining as it could be. Though, this is the first week of school. They're all like, wide-eyed and impressionable. They will become jaded with time. It always happens. And then their personalities really shine through. And that's when things get thrown, words get said, you get stressed, parents get called, all those lovely, lovely things of education. But yeah, it was good to make this video. Also, just so you know, next week should be another Reddit video. Those will start to be a little bit more regular. I've talked to Bigler, my player that sort of kind of heads all of that stuff, and we've decided to do those like every second and fourth weekend. And so those videos will come out on those following Tuesdays. And also, I'm going to start taking some more regular breaks from DMing. The last weekend of every month, I'm not going to DM a session, which means there won't be a campaign video on those Fridays. But I will hopefully be able to use that time to get to be a player in some different games, or to, continue playing through the solo adventures that I've enjoyed. I'm also very much looking forward to getting into Baldur's Gate 3. I literally bought a PS5 for that game. My sad little desktop just wouldn't have been able to handle it. So I am so excited to finally get into that game. So just a few things to watch out for. Something totally different. I am looking into either starting a Patreon or starting a membership tier on this channel, and I can talk about this more in maybe a different video, but this would be like an opportunity to just give $1 or $2 a month or something, so that you can get, a shout out in videos or have access to some exclusive polls and posts about voting for upcoming videos or learning about upcoming videos and stuff going on in my life. This is just a way to sort of financially support the channel. It's not something that I'm gonna push super hard. This is just if you really want to do it. But I just wanted to let you know that that's something that I am working on and trying to figure out exactly how I want to handle it. So just be on the lookout for that. But yeah, I hope you guys have a great day, and yeah, I'll see you again next time.